It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And welcome on in. Good morning, good evening, and appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio. And I'm filling in for Gary and Eric. They do return after the first of the year, and it's always an honor to fill in for the guys. We do have some late breaking news actually here just in the last couple of hours that is of particular importance to yours truly. I am based in Nashville, Tennessee, and there's a story now from Fox News about the Nashville Covenant shooting. Remember Audrey Hale, a woman who identified as a man, walked into a Christian school, the Covenant School, and killed a total of 6 people, 3 adults and 3 children. This was back in March of 2023, March 27th of 2023. Horrible, horrible story. And now there is some late breaking news here in the last couple of hours on that story. So I'm going to get through some of this. I've been, again, because I'm in Nashville, I've been shoulder deep in all of this for, years since the whole thing happened. Tragically, again, back on March 27th of 2023. So let me get into what the new information is, and that is that Audrey Hale purchased the guns that she utilized in the shooting, it would appear, through Pell Grants. Now, these allegations have been heard before, with reporting from various news outlets, including the Tennessee Star right here in the Volunteer State. And these new documents that have been released now by the FBI, there was about 100 or documents that have been released by the FBI. And in these documents, it does show that she wrote in her notes that she was going to use these Pell Grants, this Pell Grant money, to pay for the guns used in the shooting. Now, Audrey Hale was a female identified as a male. So when you hear me say she, well, that's because that is the sex assigned to her at birth. So basically, the bottom line is this means that taxpayers paid for the guns used in this horrendous killing. Now, remember, and if you don't know, it's totally understandable, but what exactly is a Pell Grant? Let's start there. A Pell Grant is not a loan. You don't have to pay them back. And what they're designed to be utilized as, is to help cover the costs of post-secondary education. And they are awarded as needs-based, so lower-income students get these grants based on their need. And yes, these Pell Grants come from taxpayers. So this is from the New York Post. In the journal entry, Hale wrote that FAFSA grant checks started at $2,050.86, and it followed by ledger-style notes documenting payments from a college of the, I believe it's NOSSI, is that NOSI College of Art and Design in Nashville, where Hale was enrolled at the time. The financial entries appear alongside extensive notes about firearms that Hale planned to purchase and use in the attack. The Tennessee Star also reported those records may lend support to statements Hale's parents made to Metro Nashville Police Department detectives shortly after the shooting. Hale's parents reportedly told investigators in 2023 that their child had used federal Pell Grant money to purchase the firearms used in the attack. So it's horrifying. So in other words, our taxpayer dollars, again, being used for something horrific. In this case, it is this Pell Grant money that Audrey Hale used to buy the guns apparently used in this attack. Now, remember, with Pell Grants, the money goes to the school for tuition, fees, and housing, generally speaking. But if there's money left over, that money goes to the student as part of what they call a refund. And so students can spend it, apparently, on whatever they want, including guns. and that is the crux of this story this morning. So now Kash Patel's FBI has released more than 100 pages of her writing. And by the way, there are apparently thousands of documents that still have not been released. I'm going to get into that here in a minute. But as I said before, being here in Nashville, I've been covering this story since it happened back on March 27th of 2023. I was actually on the air when the whole thing happened, along with the other hosts on the radio station that I work at full time, Super Talk 99.7 WTN in Nashville. I'm the morning host. And so part of what frustrates everyone involved here in Nashville and across the country who have been watching this is that Audrey Hale had left behind 20 or so journals, a suicide note, whole bunch of other materials and devices that she had used to plan the attack on Covenant. And whether we're talking about the FBI, whether we are talking about the local Metro Nashville Police Department, nobody seems interested in releasing all of the documents. Why is that? Is it because Audrey Hale was trans? Is it because Audrey Hale was 28 years old, was born a female, identified as Aiden, a man? Maybe that's what it is. That the ultra woke in this country did not want this material released because it would reflect poorly on the trans community. Nobody knows because nobody's seen all of the documents. And so that has been an ongoing conversation here in Nashville. I mean, this is almost, 3 years now in the making? The attack happened in March, the end of March of 2023. We're heading now into 2026. So in another couple of months, in another few months, we're going on 3 years. Why in the world have we not seen all of those documents? Why in the world have we not seen the devices that were also left behind? Why is it that the authorities refuse to release everything? Now, some of the documents have been released by some media outlets, including Super Talk 99.7 WTN and a guy by the name of Brian Wilson, who at the time, if I'm not mistaken, 3 years ago. So Brian was the the afternoon host, actually, at the time on 99.7 WTN. And he was able to get not only some of these documents, but he was also able to get some recordings, some audio recordings that the authorities had the interview with Audrey Hale's parents. And he released some of these recordings that the Metro Nashville Police Department would not. So Brian got the recordings. He got them legally. Somebody within the department, I guess, had access to the recordings, leaked them to Brian, and Brian, of course, aired portions on WTN. It was a very big deal for a couple of different reasons. Number one is because you had media outlets here in the city who weren't really asking the same questions that outlets like WTN Talk Radio were asking about the shooting, and also the Tennessee Star, also a very conservative, media outlet. It's a website, TennesseeStar.com. Great journalism there as well. But, we're sort of, we're considered, whatever you want to call us, talk radio or, alternate media, whatever you want to call us. But the bottom line is talk radio and the Tennessee Star, we were the ones, not the Tennessean, not the local TV stations, we were the ones who were really leading the charge on trying to get these documents released and releasing some of these documents. Now, Congressman John Rose, out of course, the great state of Tennessee, he is also now running for the position of governor here in the state. He has said in the past that, yes, we do need to see everything.
So I did get to view these documents, a couple thousand pages that are primarily comprised of the writings and work of the perpetrator of the Covenant School shooting. But they do provide a great deal of insight and I think confirm some of the suspicions that I've had all along. Of course, we asked for this information 2 years ago. We requested access to it, both to the Metro Nashville Police Department in a letter I sent to Chief Drake, and also in a letter I sent to the Biden FBI to Director Wray. We really never received a response from the Metro Nashville Police Department one way or the other. About 6 months after requesting the information from the Biden FBI, we got a letter that was really non-responsive and basically indicated they would not release the information to us.
I mean, why not? Why not? Now, you may recall, by the way, if you have been interested in this case, as it continues to roll on through the original horrendous act to the investigation to the refusal to release all of these documents, some have been released. Some were, again, received and released by Steven Crowder. Other documents and interview excerpts, again, as the police spoke to Audrey Hale's parents, were received and aired on my station, WTN, by my friend Brian Wilson. You folks in Nashville certainly do remember that. And so we find out in these documents that she used to go to Covenant. She hated Christianity. She was obsessed with mass shooters and aspired to be famous or infamous, if you will. She had planned this attack for a long time, years actually, and she had originally planned to shoot up another location or locations, but decided ultimately on this Christian school, a Covenant school, because they were lacking in security. She was also on a lot of psychotropic drugs. Now, this interview with John Rose, it was months ago, as a matter of fact, when he was allowed to look at the documents, and he says that, yes, all of these documents do need to be released. So my thinking, again, is that the authorities are keeping these documents withheld because they have something to hide. Maybe it has something to do with her identifying as a man. I really don't know. But thanks to the leaks, we do have some information. But again, John Rose says we need to see all of it.
Much of all of this information should be made publicly available. And I think any attempt to keep it from the public eye and from public view really runs counter not only to the First Amendment, but also to the rights of American citizens, and in this case, Tennesseans and Nashvillians, to understand this heinous crime and understand who else might be responsible or accountable for it, and how we as a society may have missed opportunities to avert this, and how we might well avert future crimes if we had access to this information.
I mean, obviously he's right, and obviously the authorities, whether we're talking about the FBI, whether we are talking about Metro Nashville Police, in my opinion, clearly they're trying to hide something. It's also very strange about how this whole thing played out. You know, so many people talk about the importance of releasing this material. I have said often that if you want to understand why these kinds of horrendous attacks happen, then you do need to see this material. In a strange twist along the way, the parents of Audrey Hale transferred, listen to this, copyright ownership of all of these documents and materials to the Covenant Schools victims' families. And those families didn't want the materials released. Isn't that bizarre? Now, I'd never actually heard of this before, where material evidence in a crime could actually be copyrighted and transferred over to the families of the victims. I've never heard of that before, and a lot of other people are scratching their heads too. But here's a shocker. A local judge in Nashville actually sided with the victims' families. They said that they were worried about trauma and copycat risks. But again, if you're asking me, if you really want to understand these things, then you need to have these things fully released so that people who are far smarter than me can look at these things and dissect for themselves exactly why Audrey Hale did what she did so that we can actually prevent these kinds of attacks. So there does seem to be a cover-up. Here's one last audio bite from John Rose.
I mean, I think there's no better way than to cast sunlight on these things, give the press and the people access to it, and then we ought to expect the press to do their job and ferret out this information. And some of that's been happening. But in the case of the Covenant shooting, I think we've seen a concerted effort to keep that information hidden. And I think by hiding that information, we only exacerbate the likelihood that these kinds of incidents might continue in the future.
Congressman John Rose absolutely speaks the truth. And by the way, in her screed, in her manifesto, there really wasn't a manifesto. It was just a whole bunch of journals and devices and so forth. She did have something to say about Donald Trump. I'm going to tell you about that coming up next. By the way, the phone number is always 866-90-RED-I. And if you want to not call in, but text in, my text line is open tonight at 615-737-9986. Got a lot more straight ahead. Dan Mandis here for Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller. Due to safety concerns, many motor carriers have policies that limit or prohibit the use of cruise control. You should only use it in good driving conditions, during daylight hours, and on roads that have light traffic, few curves or hills, and a consistent speed limit. Never use cruise control when operating in adverse driving conditions, including wet, icy, or slippery roads, during rush hour in heavy traffic or on congested highways, at night, or when you're tired or fatigued. You want to be controlling and adjusting your speed as you drive instead of having to suddenly brake if you encounter an obstacle. In the case of a slippery road surface, you want to be able to slow your vehicle by not accelerating instead of using the brakes whenever possible. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-I.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-I is the phone number. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. They do return following the first of the year, and definitely looking forward to their return. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, talking about this story that is broke here in the last couple of hours, that the Nashville Covenant shooter, Audrey Hale, used Pell Grant money to purchase the guns used in that shooting that killed 3 adults and 3 small children. One of the things, and I've gone through in the previous segment, I've gone through all of the particulars, but one of the things that I'm talking about, is, and a lot of people discuss, is the fact that there's a lot of materials that have yet to be released of her writings. One of the things that Hale talked about and fantasized about in her fantasy murder list was killing President Donald Trump. That's right. A couple of names were redacted by the FBI. Hale included President Donald Trump on a handwritten fantasy murder list, a short list of only 4 names, with 2 redacted by the FBI, but Donald Trump was listed first in one column of people she expressed wanting to kill. This was described as part of her violent fantasies, not a real plan. She also, by the way, also talked about shooting and killing her own father. In separate entries around May of 2019, Hale complained about her father's interest in politics, writing things like going on the internet, watching that dumb politics, Donald Trump BS more than once a day, and referring to political news as political bull S, with talking heads ear infection creators. So there you go. Got a lot more straight ahead right here on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio. Phone lines are open at 866-90-RED-EYE, and I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and that airs 6 to 10 Eastern Time, and you can find us on all the streaming apps. You can also find the podcasts and the downloads and everything else. Just find all of the information you need at 997WTN.com. In particular, I've had a lot of people ask me about podcasts to my local show. You can find me on the Apple Podcast. So just go in and search my name, and there they will pop up. So, of course, we have a Somali fraud update in Minnesota. I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. As you know, the FBI has now joined the case. You've got some Republicans in Congress. They are investigating this whole thing as well. It's getting really ugly, and you do hope that a lot of people will go to jail. But I love this quote. Ilhan Omar, I want to make sure that this is my favorite audio bite of the night, just so you know. This is Ilhan Omar, of course, the congresswoman out of the fine city of Minneapolis. Listen to this. Ilhan Omar on Donald Trump.
Our president's obsession with me and the Somali community really is creepy and healthy. And we are not, and I am not, someone to be intimidated, and we are not going to be scapegoated. We are here to stay.
Well, I think you ought to go to jail, actually, and I hope to investigate you personally, Ilhan Omar. So the reason why Donald Trump, and by the way, it's not just Donald Trump, it is America who has an obsession with the Somali community in Minnesota. Not because we have any ill intent towards you per se, but it's because of all of the fraud that we are finding out about. And every single day, it seems to be getting worse and worse. And so if I do have any ill intent towards the, and I'm going to air quote this, the Somali community in Minneapolis, and now we have all of these other cities that are popping up where there also is apparently Somalian fraud going on. But any ill intent that I have is because of the fraud and not because y'all are just from Somalia, although I would like to stop Somalians from coming into this country because this is becoming clearly an epidemic of fraud. So if she really truly believes that Donald Trump has an obsession with her, she is only showing her narcissism, but I think clearly she is deflecting. And she should be investigated. Absolutely. So here's another one. Jessica Tarlov. Of course, you know that she's on the 5. She is the liberal on the 5, most of the time, I believe, but she is the liberal of the bunch. And so yesterday, I played for you several clips of photojournalist Nick Shirley's video where 42 minutes, where he went to all of these different daycare and healthcare facilities in Minnesota that were empty. And as he did, he was with a guy named David who has been doing his own investigation as well. Well, old Jessica Tarlov on Fox, I would call her the village idiot, but she's not believing it. Listen.
Nick Shirley's reporting there's no way that this kid walking around uncovered $100 million worth of fraud on his own. There have been tons of people working behind the scenes quietly, including independent local journalists that have been exposing this. I don't know about the veracity of every single thing that he's gone and seen. That's being debated online. But obviously there's a huge problem here. It does Democrats no favors to get partisan about this and to dig in and say, oh, it absolutely couldn't be happening because it's my team that this happened.
Well, she's wrong and she's right. So she is wrong. If you missed the show, she's wrong about Nick Shirley. So if you missed the show yesterday, he went from one facility to another. By the way, I love how she dismisses Nick Shirley as a kid. I don't even know how old Nick Shirley is. But if you missed the show yesterday, I again played all of this audio for you. But he went from one facility to another, and confirmed that there was no one at these places. The doors were locked, no kids, windows had shades drawn, and people in the area literally said there are never kids around. He even asked one of these, Somalian daycare centers if he could register his son for daycare, and they actually said in broken English, why? Like, why do you want to register your kid and go away in all of that? And so that video absolutely broke the internet, and it did break this thing wide open. 42 minutes of truth and proof that the left has been lying this whole time. Now, she's also wrong. I actually wonder if she even watched the video, because he wasn't just on his own, as she said in that audio recording. No. He had a guy, Nick Shirley had a guy named David with him. And David has been investigating this for years. So I don't know if Tarloff is just talking out of her behind or what she's doing, but Nick Shirley had this guy, David, with him, and David had done a lot of this investigation. But it was Nick Shirley who did the video and had the knowledge and the wherewithal to get it out into the media. Now, it is also true, this is where she's right. It is also true that Democrats have been doing themselves no favors by trying to either not even admit that this is an issue, or worse, try to call this some sort of white supremacist attack like that idiot Tim Walz did. Listen.
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy.
Is anybody buying this BS from Tim Walz? Is anybody actually buying that load of heaping pile of crap that he's trying to sell? Saying that the Trump administration and the authorities are targeting the Somali community in Minnesota because it's based in white supremacy, and not the fact that there is absolutely clear evidence of fraud. I mean, if he gets reelected, because Tim Walz, he's running for reelection. Can you imagine if he gets reelected? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he did, because that's how the Democrats often vote. But according to the left, if you're keeping track, Ilhan Omar says that it's Donald Trump who is simply obsessed with her, and there's no issues of fraud. I guess that's what she's saying. You got Jessica Tarloff denying that Nick Shirley uncovered anything, which is, of course, nuts. I guarantee you that she did not even watch the full Waltz saying that this is a white supremacist attack. I mean, what's funny is that all of this pretty much checks out, right? Talking about the behavior of these Democrats. When you have no defense, you just name call and deflect. That's what the Democrats do. And sadly, they do it with the help of the mainstream media. And by the way, this isn't Minnesota tax dollars per se. This is millions in federal tax dollars. For example, the Feeding Our Future case was $250 million in federal funds from the USDA. So, I mean, if you're not in Minnesota and you're wondering, why are people spending so much time talking about a Minnesota problem? This is not a Minnesota problem. This is an American problem, because American taxpayer dollars were used for this fraud. So not only are the people of Minnesota being ripped off, but so are you if you live in Michigan, if you live in Illinois, if you live in California. Doesn't matter. If you live in Tennessee. my friends in Tennessee. We're all being ripped off. And it seems pretty clear to me that the Democrats, they are not paying attention to what this story is all about. Or they are, and they're just trying to deflect because they know that it looks bad on them. I think Bill Melugin on Fox News summed it up pretty nicely, actually.
I think the reason this resonates with so many people is people work hard, they pay their taxes, and they expect their tax dollars to go to the right things. And when you see something like this, it just makes your blood boil. Give us your reaction.
Yeah, I think you're right. People sense that they're getting bilked here. They sense that they bought into a deal, which was Democrats largely pitched to you, hey, we need these giant government programs. You need to fund them to be a good person, and then we're going to help people with things. And if that money goes to fraud, you're not only not helping people, you are taking money from Americans who could use it for honest ends. And that is criminal. You should not be doing that. People should answer for it.
That's Mary Catherine Ham, and again, that was on Fox News. People, of course, angry at the politicians. Folks are also angry, and this is where I seem to go a lot. Because you know what the thing is? My expectation is so low at this point when it comes to politicians and media, so-called news media. Because it is that local media who stood by and did not shine a light on this corruption. And they're still covering it up. It took Nick Shirley with a 42-minute video to really blow this thing wide open, and it happened on YouTube. Remember that there have been whistleblowers, and Tim Walz has shut them down for political reasons. Remember this. Remember that Quality Learning Center? We talked about this last night, where they misspelled the word learning on their sign, and it actually read Learing Center? Yeah. Well, you know that they had racked up like a dozen violations, but they still received $8 million in funding after these violations. No follow-ups, by the way, to see if the violations were taken care of. They just got $8 million. It's incredible to me. And you know what's so funny about this? Is that the video with Nick Shirley, it was done in a day. So why is it that the Minnesota state government couldn't do the same thing? Drive to these various locations, knock on the door, and see what in the world was going on, because they don't want to know the truth. By the way, remember, state lawmakers, I should say state employees, were calling this out. They were calling out the fraud. They were calling out the violations. And Tim Walz, as I've been telling you for the last many days now, Tim Walz bullied them into submission. I know that you know all of this at this point. Apparently now, this is the update to the story. I don't know if you saw this. So apparently that very same Quality Learning Center is now bustling with kids, as staff reportedly trucked in dozens of children. That's right. So the story goes viral. It hits the media here in the last couple of days, thanks to Nick Shirley's video. And then all of a sudden, the Quality Learing Center now has a bunch of kids there. Listen to this from the Daily Mail and the New York Post. A daycare facility allegedly involved in Minnesota's ongoing fraud scandal has hit back at criticism over a misspelled sign as staff reportedly trucked in children. That's right. On Monday, the New York Post observed staff trucking in dozens of children, despite locals admitting they thought the facility had been permanently closed because they never saw kids being dropped off. Such a classic story. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. There is so much going on. Coming up in the next hour, more on Somali fraud. I absolutely love that Kash Patel is really getting aggressive in this situation. So we're going to talk about that. Also, really good day yesterday for JD Vance. I'm going to tell you why coming up next as well. There is a lot of things going on, including in California. Did you hear what's happening or not happening in California related to a lawsuit that they leveled against President Donald Trump? It is all straight ahead right here on Red Eye Radio.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. Have no fear. Gary and Eric will return after the first of the year. And I always love filling in. You can call 866-90 Red Eye. You can also, if you can't call in, you can always text in. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm using my text line tonight, 615-737-9986. Got a text message out of Oregon, 541 area code, reminding me, I actually did not know this, but I think that good parenting is, I don't know if I would say that it's a lost art, but I think that good parenting oftentimes is so critical to the success of a younger generation. I'm a big fan, obviously, of good parenting. Listen to this. Nick Shirley, I've been talking about him a lot over the last several days, obviously. The YouTuber who did what he could, and he did an amazing job at exposing the Somali fraud in Minneapolis. It was already out there. He just blew it absolutely wide open. So, guy out of Oregon sends me a note and asks me about Nick Shirley's mom. I had no idea that his mother, Nick Shirley, is 23 years old. Did you know that his mom helps him with his videos? How cool is that? Nick Shirley's mom, Brooke Shirley, has collaborated with and supported him in his content creation. She has appeared alongside Nick in videos and interviews as well. Notably, in March of 2024, they co-appeared on Newsmax's National Report segment titled Mother and Son Expose Reality of Migrant Crisis, where they discussed immigration-related issues together. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it, but I absolutely love that Nick Shirley is collaborating with his mom in his success. I think that is absolutely brilliant and well done, Mom. I do. As I said, I love that. There's a lot of things going on tonight. I want to get right to it. And again, my name is Dan Mandis. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Let's talk about JD Vance. Now, I will tell you right up front, I'm a big fan of JD Vance, and it's never too early to talk about 2028. Especially when you have a Republican field that I would say is so incredibly strong. So Harry Enton breaks it all down. The focus of this segment on CNN was all about J.D. Vance.
It is never too early to talk about political rights because these guys are running already, even if they haven't formally declared. They're already running, and J.D. Vance is running well ahead of the field. I mean, take a look here. Top chances to be the 2028 GOP president nominee, the prediction market odds. Look at this, J.D. Vance, 48% chance. Nobody else is even close.
So without even going any further, I will tell you that, yes, heading into 2028, a full 3 years ahead of time, yes, I'm talking about this, But so is CNN. JD Vance is the clear front runner with 48%, as you just heard. JD is incredibly popular, and part of the reason is that he came across at the Turning Point USA event a couple of weeks ago as a uniter. I mean, I don't know if you saw it or if you saw clips, but his speech at the Turning Point event in Phoenix was incredible. Now, this polling from CNN comes just a couple of weeks after he gave that incredible speech that, at least in my opinion, put him out front during this event, and it put him in front of the pack there for all of the Republicans wanting to run for the presidency. J.D. Vance, again, with this speech, really set himself apart as he remembered Charlie Kirk.
If you miss Charlie Kirk, do you promise to fight what he died for? Do you promise to take the country back from the people who took his life? Do you promise to help defeat the radicals who cheered his death? Do you promise to honor his memory by having faith in the God he loved? My friends, commit to these things, and I promise you victory. I promise you closed borders and safe communities. I promise you good jobs and a dignified life. Only God can promise you salvation in heaven, but together we can fulfill the promise of the greatest nation in the history of the earth. Merry Christmas, my friends. Let's keep fighting.
Yeah, that is J.D. Vance, and it's no wonder, you now see or hear why Harry Enton shows him at 48%. So, to me, the appeal of J.D. Vance, it is understandable. I said the other night, and I still believe that while J.D. Vance is overall a better candidate, Marco Rubio has the better resume. There's no doubt about that. Marco Rubio, of course, senator, longtime senator, is a matter of fact, an incredible Secretary of State. But J.D. Vance? He's so well-spoken, and he is so relatable. I mean, I don't even know, does J.D. Vance have any negatives? At least to conservatives, I don't think so. I mean, this is a guy, and by the way, if you can think of a negative of J.D. Vance, you can hit me on the text line 615-737-9986. But J.D. has overcome so much as a kid who grew up in such poverty and such chaos. If you haven't seen the movie based on his childhood, it is an absolute must, especially for conservatives. It is called Hillbilly Elegy, and I just saw it for the first time a few months ago. So Hillbilly Elegy, he's an author, he's a lawyer. Of course, as you know, he's a senator and now a vice president, learning from Donald Trump. It's like on-the-job training. So, yes, J.D. Vance is way out front.
Nobody else is even close. Marco Rubio is way back at 12%, and no one else is even above a 5% chance of being the 2028 GOP nominee. J.D. Vance is like Mario Andretti, and Marco Rubio and the rest of the field are like going around in go-karts at this point. I mean, that's really what we're looking at. J.D. Vance is the clear, heavy favorite at this time.
Yeah, Marco Rubio, he's 12% is where Marco Rubio is. So J.D. Vance, I mean, he is clearly, again, at 48% the front runner. I don't know if there's ever been a more presumptive presidential candidate in all of my years of watching politics, other than Donald Trump, of course, going into the race, running for re-election against Joe Biden, the race of 2024. But, at least right now, Vance does seem to be the guy. And unless something else happens or someone new comes along, I believe that the Republicans of all stripes will unite behind J.D. Vance. One of the things that I really liked about his speech that he gave at Turning Point, and he talked about how you have all of these influencers. You got, if you saw the event, you had Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Steve Bannon and, some of these other influencers. Ben Shapiro was another one. And they're all sort of, just going after each other on stage. And, on the one hand, you could say, at least the Republicans are willing to have the conversation. And I do appreciate that. The Republicans are willing to air their dirty laundry. And that's all fine, well, and good. But I think that all of those entities would actually unite against J.D. Vance. And that's what he was talking about up on stage, is all of the different factions of the conservative movement uniting behind one person, and that would be J.D. Vance. It does seem to me. They also, by the way, and I thought this was really interesting from a historical perspective, if you will, that they ran some numbers for New Hampshire, the first in the nation primary. And not surprisingly, J.D. Vance is huge among Republicans.
Take a look at New Hampshire, right? The first in the nation primary. I mean, take a look here. J.D. Vance at 51%. The next closest is Nikki Haley, who's at 9. I mean, what is that? That's 42 points ahead of the pack. Tulsi Gabbard is at 8. In the first in the nation primary, J.D. Vance, running 42 points ahead. There's a reason why he's such a heavy favorite in the prediction market so far, because if you win the GOP primary in New Hampshire, chances are you're going to be the Republican nominee for president.
Sort of. Going down the list, Reagan won. I just did a little bit of research. Reagan won New Hampshire in 1976. Gerald Ford, though, won the nomination. Carter beats Ford to go to the White House. 1980. You got George H.W. Bush won New Hampshire. Reagan won the nomination and, of course, the presidency. But now we have coming up in 2028 is a race where there is not an incumbent. Trump, of course, obviously is termed out. He makes some noise about running for a third term. We'll have to see what happens. But, what happened in the past when a Republican wins New Hampshire? In the last several decades, they win the nomination when there is not an incumbent. Dole in 1996, George W. Bush in the year 2000, John McCain in 2008, Mitt Romney in 2012, and of course, Donald Trump won in both 2016 and 2024. So with all of those nominees and all of those primaries, has there ever been someone so far ahead in the early polling as J.D. Vance is now? It is a good question. It was a question posed to Harry Enton.
I look back, hitting 50% plus in the early New Hampshire polls for a non-sitting president. J.D. Vance is the only one. You can go all the way back in the polling archives, all the way back to 1980, which is the earliest I could look at. J.D. Vance is the only one ever to getting a majority of the New Hampshire vote according to the early primary polls. At this point, J.D. Vance is pulling off something historic at this time, and that is the key reason why, at this point, he is the far and away favorite for the Republican nomination. He's just way out ahead of the pack.
Yeah, and they did ask a great question about vice presidents running to claim the Oval Office. So in no particular order, let's go through some of them. You had, of course, most recently, Kamala Harris. She was, as everyone knows, an absolutely epic fail. She may be running again. More on that in a second. You also had George H.W. Bush. He won a single term. You had Al Gore. He lost. You had Humphreys, who lost. And, of course, Richard Nixon did win. So, all of this to say that it is 3 years away. 3 years before the election. And, by the way, that is not only a single lifetime, that is many lifetimes away in politics. I mean, right now, it even seems silly to start talking about the midterm elections next year. There's a lot going on, but a lot can happen between now and November of 2026. And Lord knows what's going to happen in 2028. But, even Marco Rubio has come out and said that J.D. Vance is the guy, and Rubio himself is, I think he actually did endorse J.D. Vance. And Donald Trump has made it perfectly clear that J.D. Vance is the one that he would like to see as replacing him in the Oval Office. Now, coming up, I want you to think about all of the names that are out there that could run for the White House amongst conservatives heading into 2028. I mean, I've already mentioned a couple of them, right? You've got JD Vance, you've got Marco Rubio. Those are the big two. You also have others. You have Ron DeSantis, who could run, and just others, I'm sure. But really, obviously, you do have JD Vance, who is, really sucking up all the air in the room. And so now, coming up next, we are going to talk about the Democrats that are out there. I think it was the Daily Mail that talked about reporting on all the names that the Democrats are talking about coming into 2028. And I'm going to give you a hint, at least from my perspective, none of them are any good. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
What were some of the top weather stories of 2025? USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says January started the year with wildfires in California.
The Palisades and the Eaton fires, they had a relatively small geographic footprint, less than 40,000 acres. But when those fires had finished burning, unfortunately, they became the second and third most destructive wildfires in California modern history.
With totals including
over 9,000 structures destroyed by the Eaton fire, almost 7,000 by the Palisades fire. Combined total, more than 16,000 structures destroyed, over $60 billion in damages, and tragically, at least 30 fatalities.
Beyond the California fires, for the remainder of the year,
U.S. wildfire acreage in 2025, only around 5 million acres, and that compares to the 10-year average of 7.3 million acres. So we were just a little over two-thirds of average on the wildfire acreage for 2025.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. I've got a confession to make. Dan Mandis here. I just turned 58 the day after Christmas. The mind is the first to go, man. Well, in my case, the second to go, because I am completely bald. But for the life of me, I was in that previous segment. I couldn't think of any other names of Republicans that would be contenders outside of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio for the next presidential election. So, of course, I Googled it. Here's some names. I did mention Ron DeSantis. Ted Cruz. I like Ted. No thanks. Ted Cruz, he's got the likability of like a starfish. You know what I mean? I just not a big fan. Donald Trump Jr. I don't think he wants to be president. I don't. Kristi Noem, Greg Abbott, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. Tim Scott is up there, and I like Tim Scott a lot. Josh Hawley is another guy that I like. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, home flippin' run. Glenn Youngkin, the governor, governor of Virginia. Vivek Ramaswamy. Of course, I'm a big Vivek Ramaswamy fan. Nikki Haley? No way. No way. So I look at these names. And I think who would have a shot? I do think that Donald Trump Jr., I think that he would actually have a shot because I think that he would channel that charisma that his dad clearly has. He said a lot of controversial stuff just like his dad, and it has not hurt his dad. Again, I like Tim Scott. I like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I really like Vivek Ramaswamy. So those are, at least to me, the ones that I really like. I think Glenn Youngkin is somebody that has some crossover appeal for independence, but I don't think that's what we're going for. Certainly not Nikki Haley. I do like, again, Sarah Huckabee Sanders as well. So there's a lot of good names here. Ted Cruz is a guy that I used to really like, and I don't know what happened with me and Ted. I soured on him, and I don't really know why. You know, he's a brilliant attorney. He's a good conservative senator. He had to be schooled by Donald Trump, of course. We all know that story. But I think the guy who has really done a lot to sort of redeem himself from the anti-Trump crowd to the Trump crowd is Marco Rubio. I mean, he could not stand Donald Trump initially. By the way, neither could JD Vance. Both, though, have done amazing jobs inside of Donald Trump's cabinet. Okay, coming up next, what are some of the Democrat names? You're not going to believe this. Coming up next on Red Eye Radio.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It is Red Eye Radio. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Gary and Eric. They do return after the first of the year. And, you know, we are heading into a midterm election year. And then following that, off we go into the presidential season. So a guy called up. I just talked about JD Vance, and I talked about other people that are considering running in 2028 for the Republican side, because Donald Trump, assuming he doesn't try to run for a third term, I believe it'll be JD Vance. I just went through all of that. But a guy called up, he didn't want to go on the air, but he said, who do I believe would be a good running mate for JD Vance? I believe that Marco Rubio would be a great running mate for JD Vance. But here's the thing. Marco Rubio is one heck of a Secretary of State. So, I mean, I believe that unless they sort of expand the duties of a vice president, I think Marco Rubio should stay Secretary of State under a J.D. Vance administration. That's what I think, which then does, you know, ask the question, okay, so if not Marco Rubio, who would be a great running mate for J.D. Vance? Well, then you go through the list that I just went through. You do have, and I'm going to go through the people that I like, right? So how would you like a J.D. Vance, Tim Scott ticket? Tim Scott, former senator from South Carolina. They talk about how he is someone who could broaden the appeal of a J.D. Vance ticket with Tim Scott. We got retiring from the Senate in 2028. So Tim Scott might be a guy who would be a good running mate. He did run for the presidency last time around. He didn't fare too well, but he's a likable guy. Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I mean, I think that she is somebody who is hugely popular amongst the Trump crowd. She, of course, the daughter of Mike Huckabee. And she was at one point, for a very somewhat short period of time, was a press secretary for Donald Trump. And I think that she is really smart. And you've got Vivek Ramaswamy in there as well. So there's a number of people that could be a great running mate for J.D. Vance. And by the way, don't forget that Vivek Ramaswamy and old J.D. Vance, they are good friends. Now, what about the Democrats? This was an article written by Mark Halperin, one of my favorites. I know that the guys like to quote him as well. But they go through 8 Democrats who very well could be running for the White House heading into 2028. So I'm just going to give you some of these names. And he does admit, and I'm even admitting too, that we are a long ways away. But, you know, if you're a conservative, here's the way that I look at this. If you are a conservative, which of these candidates would you most want your candidate to run against? I mean, for example, when Kamala Harris, when the Democrats dispatched with Joe Biden and they brought in Kamala Harris, I was kind of okay with that because Kamala Harris was a complete and epic train wreck. So who would you, amongst these 8, who would you like to see? Well, for example, if it's going to be J.D. Vance on the right, who would you want J.D. Vance to run against? Who is the most beatable? Number 1, according to Mark Halperin, you've got, and by the way, I don't believe this is in any particular order, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, A.O.C., former bartender turned congresswoman. Some say New York Congresswoman A.O.C. is the most likely to win the nomination. Others wouldn't rank her at all. Isn't that crazy? Like, you have some people out there that will look at A.O.C. and they'll say she has no credibility, she doesn't have the smarts, she certainly doesn't have the experience, she doesn't even rank. Other people will say she is the most dangerous to the Republicans. Mark Halperin writes, if the Democrat base of the party decides that it wants a torch-wielding outsider, she becomes instantly formidable. Her strength is the unmatched grassroots energy she generates. Nobody else on this list can summon a movement the way that she can. He says that her secret strength is that behind the scenes, AOC, she's built more bridges within the party than people assume, reaching out to more moderate members of her own party and even to a few Republicans. Now, here are the weaknesses. Skepticism from centrists, limited experience that comes with relatively young age, 36, and concerns over her seriousness. Running for president means sacrificing on nearly everything else. Insiders question if she is ready for that. You know, I think she's got some other weaknesses as well. I don't believe that she is particularly well-spoken, but whatever. And she is extremely left. And I don't, to be perfectly honest with you, you know, I've talked to congressmen. During my show in Nashville, I interview a lot of Republicans, and part of what they've told me is that she is largely considered a joke. But whatever. How about J.D. Pritzker, currently the governor of Illinois? If Democrats decide they want a billionaire after all, and stranger things have happened, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is waiting in the wings. Now, how crazy would it be if the Democrats, after all of these years of castigating and demonizing Donald Trump and all the other millionaires and billionaires out there, how crazy would it be if J.B. Pritzker ended up as their nominee? That's me, not Mark Halperin. But this is what Mark Halperin says. The Illinois governor, his greatest strength goes together with his most obvious weakness. With an estimated net worth of $3.7 billion from an inherited Hyatt Hotels fortune, he can self-fund. But many Democrats are not eager to nominate someone who can buy their own campaign. His secret strength is that he is deeply connected to Democratic interest groups, especially labor unions. And wearing his working class sympathies on his sleeve, he advocates for minimum wage hikes and forgiving medical debt. I think that when it comes to J.B. Pritzker, I think that you have to, and the same goes for Gavin Newsom. I'll call him Newsom. But the same thing applies. Illinois is an absolute flippant train wreck. So, I mean, if you're looking at a resume, you look at somebody's resume, and you look at the bullet points. Does J.B. Pritzker really have a lot to be proud of when it comes to the state of Illinois? I don't think so. Does he? I mean, it's overrun with illegal aliens. Of course, you talk about, you know, the sanctuary city status of Chicago and the sanctuary state status of Illinois. And You look at how people are really angry with J.B. Pritzker in the state of Illinois. I don't think that he's got the appropriate resume that will connect with the Democrats. I just don't. But then again, stranger things have happened because you had the Democrats vote for Kamala Harris, just not in enough numbers. Wes Moore. Now, if you've never heard of Wes Moore, he is the governor of Maryland, and he was actually, believe it or not, praised by none other than George Clooney as being a top contender for the Democratic Party's nomination. And by the way, if you're going to laugh at my reference to George Clooney, remember that it is George Clooney that took out Joe Biden. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm looking at this list. Who do I worry about? I actually do worry about Wes Moore. He's got some issues, though. Wes Moore, this is what Mark Halperin writes. Wes Moore is the charismatic governor of Maryland. Hollywood loves him. George Clooney is already on board, and many Democratic donors and strategists do, too. He's got that, they say, that it factor, a seemingly stellar resume, and the ability to dazzle donors and voters alike. He's a U.S. Army combat veteran, and this is what Mark Halperin is writing. His secret advantage. This U.S. Army combat veteran is not just charming on camera, he is personally magnetic in the rooms and also the bars of the Democratic elite, which is where nomination fights are often meaningfully advanced. Now, his weakness is that he has not been in national politics long, and his accomplishments in public life can be listed on the back of a napkin. If the hype ever races ahead of the record, or his glittering bio turns out to be less than all that, the backlash could be intense. A few other names here just real quickly. Andy Beshear is the governor of Kentucky. They talk about how he is, Mark Halperin talks about how he is really kind of low-key, if you will. He is a candidate who can appeal to red state voters, mild-mannered governor of Kentucky. Andy Beshear, he says, fits the mold. I don't know. Kamala Harris is on this list. Now, here's what Mark Halperin says, and this is interesting. He says, I didn't place Kamala Harris in my top 8 just a few weeks ago, but she has begun to lean more openly into the notion that she is considering a run, with those close to her making it clear her recent interviews and book tour stop announcements are meant to send the signal that she should not be overlooked by the great speculators. I don't know, man. Kamala Harris? I mean, she did so much damage to her brand during the 107 days that she ran. And her campaign was a complete and utter failure. And she had, I forget how much it was. I mean, hundreds of millions, maybe billion, I don't know. But all of this money that was donated to her campaign, and she ended up $20 million in debt, and she lost. So I don't know. Here's what Mark Halperin says. And listen, Halperin is a guy that I deeply respect. Her known strengths are enormous: a national profile, deep relationships with core Democratic constituencies, and the historic weight of being a former vice president. A lesser-known strength, privately, she is far looser, funnier, and more natural than the cautious politician Americans see on television. If Kamala Harris showed that version more often, some of her critics might soften. Pete Buttigieg is a prodigy, he says, of modern Democratic politics. He came on stronger as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, who can speak 6 foreign languages and won a top spot as Biden's transportation secretary. But from there, he seemed to have stalled. Well, part of the problem is he didn't do crap as transportation secretary. What did he do What did Pete Buttigieg do as transportation secretary? I would say nothing. I mean, he focused on, a lot of the woke stuff, but, I mean, what do Americans know about Pete Buttigieg? He's gay. Big deal. His main strength is verbal. He can talk anyone into anything, or at least to anyone about anything. Bill Clinton likes to describe people like Buttigieg as folks who can talk the owls down from the trees. They say that he is ruthlessly strategic when they need to be, ready, for instance, to stealthily drop opposition research on arrival when the time is right. But they say that Pete Buttigieg still has a black voter problem, a fatal one if he can't fix it. Now, coming up, I'm going to talk about Gavin Newsom and a whole lot more straight ahead. This is Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339, talking about political candidates, presidential candidates. I went through the Republicans. I went through some of the Democrats as well. And I've got Gavin Newsom. I'm saving him, either best for last or worst for last, whatever. But I don't have enough time in the rest of this hour to go through what Mark Halperin and I have to say about Gavin Newsom. A lot of people chiming in on this, though. Let's Go Pitt has sent me a tweet on X. He says, more of Newsom's failures if there's another massive fire that may not have enough water again because they are shutting down the reservoirs again in California. Are you kidding me? Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.